Hello and welcome back. This is Chris with Marksman Shooting Sports in Westfield, Indiana, and you are watching Marksman TV. Today we have another firearms comparison video for you. We will be taking a look at the Japanese Type 96 light machine gun and the German MG34 General Purpose machine gun. Both of these machine guns were used in World War II by its corresponding Axis power. As they went up against both the United States and Great Britain, saw both of these in service as well. They had to go up against. We'll take a general look and see the practical uses of each and how they were employed by their respective countries and the squad level to get an idea of exactly how these were implemented in combat, their advantages and disadvantages, how they differed from one another in their roles. And we'll just take a couple points of those. I do have a full-length review video of the MG34 where I do take it out and shoot it. We do a very detailed overview of its function. If you're interested in seeing more of that type of information, I will, at the end of this video, put up a link to that. I don't have one of those videos up for the Type 96, but that'll be coming. The general purpose of this is just to take a look at comparing details between the two. Anyway, we'll go ahead and jump into that now. Hopefully it will be pretty interesting. Alright, starting with the technical details of both, starting up here with the Type 96, it does weigh in at 20 pounds and has an overall length of 42 inches. The MG34 has a weight of 26.7 pounds and has an overall length of 48 inches. Both were in service by both of their respective countries between 1936 and 1945 at the end of the war. The Japanese Type 96 is classified as a light machine gun. The German MG34 is classified as a general purpose machine gun. So the purpose of a light machine gun is to stay light and maneuverable, keeping an overall lower profile and size. The light machine gun needed to be able to be moved with pretty good agility, as the positioning of the machine gunner would vary as the tactical movement of the squad would change. It was important that it was able to maintain a good volume of sustained and suppressive fire so that other elements of the squad could maneuver against its objective. While the MG34 did serve in a light machine gun role, it was known as a general purpose machine gun because it could also serve as a heavy machine gun. On the squad level, it did maintain a low enough weight and overall length to where it could be maneuvered with the squad to provide good suppressive fire so other elements of the squad could maneuver against the objective. Also, in a defensive role, a general purpose machine gun such as the MG34 could be stabilized on its tripod to give a good direct and indirect firing ability over long ranges and to keep a very accurate and concentrated beaten zone. As this is a light machine gun, the Japanese military also needed to employ a heavy machine gun, which was the Type 92. It, along with its mount, weighed in excess of 100 pounds, I believe. It was meant to be set up and employed in a fixed position with a predetermined beaten zone pattern, usually crossing another Type 92 machine gun based on the fortifications. It was a preemptive machine gun that was to be positioned in one place. It was not easy to move, and it did require a crew to feed. Due to its weight and size, it did keep very low barrel temperatures, but that's a whole other machine gun for a whole other topic. The difference is when a military decides to employ both light and heavy weapons, it needs to have a pretty good predetermined idea of what that particular squad is going to do in a tactical sense of the planning. When you implement or when you provide your squad with a general purpose machine gun, it gives the squad a lot more flexibility in the role it can provide, especially as the tactical situations change very quickly. So that was, of course, very much in line with the doctrines of the German tactics of Blitzkrieg. Moving quickly, moving swiftly, adaptability was key. Therefore, we have the design of a general purpose machine gun. The MG34 was belt fed. A standard German MG34 belt would hold 50 rounds, which could be fed directly from the ammo can into the machine gun, or it could be fed on a 50-round drum magazine. Multiple belts could be linked together to provide longer belts of ammunition. The Type 96 was fed by a detachable 30-round box magazine. It was interesting, and it did have a counter on the rear, which I don't know if you'll be able to see that through a window there. The magazine was fed into the top of the machine gun, could be fed in very easily either by the main gunner or an assistant gunner, and was released by this ovular magazine release lever on the rear. The Japanese Mobile Strike Division was made of 4 squads. The 1st through 3rd squad would be comprised of 13 men, which would be equipped with 11 rifles, typically your Type 38 or your Type 99 Arisaka, and you would also be issued 1 light machine gun. Again, the main doctrine of this light machine gun in the squad level was to provide quick and maneuverable base of fire and suppression fire, but movement was the key, and that was very, very essential in the offensive Japanese tactics, which is typically why towards the end of the war you usually saw front-on assaults. The 4th squad, again, would mainly be made up of your heavy grenade or special weapons, artillery, knee mortars, that kind of stuff. Now, the division tactics did change throughout the war, and the squads were reconfigured as the war progressed to more defensive tactics. So in those roles, we did see the Type 96s, Type 11s, the Type 99s, and the Type 92s, all employed in defensive lines along trenches and entrenched encampments, caves, those sorts of things. The German squad, however, was made up of 10 men. You would have your squad leader, which would usually have an MP40, so machine gun. You would then have your machine gunner, an assistant gunner, an ammo carrier, and then 6 riflemen. The ammo carrier was usually also equipped with a K98, so you had 7 rifles, 1 that was usually assigned to just carry ammunition or maybe the tripod as well. Then the machine gunner charged with putting the machine gun in position and firing it. And then of course your squad leader, who would direct the action of the squad. Production of both of these was fairly complicated. They are both mainly made of machined parts. The MG34 does use stampings in some specific locations, like on the top cover and the feed tray, the bipod, things like that. Later on into the war, the German military did go into the MG42, which was a manufacturing adaptation for stamped parts. It was easier to produce, cheaper to produce, and of course as the machine gun wore out, it could be disposed and cheaply replaced. The Type 96 was later replaced by the Type 99, which was identical in every way except for it was chambered in the 7.7 millimeter round, the same cartridge as the Type 99 rifle. The Type 99 machine gun did have a flash cone, it did have a monopod. The magazine was angled a little bit differently, of course, because it was a different dimension round. However, the Type 99 was still mainly machined, and therefore it didn't really save on a whole lot of production time or cost. The Type 92 heavy machine gun, again, was mainly made of all machined parts. It was very, very complicated to produce based off of the old Hotchkiss design. That was one of the downfalls of the Japanese during the war, was lack of adaptation to industry and production. Getting back to German squad level tactics, the machine gunner was considered the focal point and the most important position within the squad. When a German squad met opposition, the first thing it would do is employ the machine gun, and the riflemen made sure that that happened. Once the machine gun was up and running and supplied with ammunition, it would lay down a base of fire, allowing the riflemen to move up and to start flanking positions. As the riflemen advanced and created a new line of base of fire to provide cover for the machine gun would then advance, and they would keep that up until the main offensive position was under sustained fire by the machine gun. It could then be flanked and outmaneuvered by the offensive riflemen within the squad with rifle grenades, potato masher grenades, rifle fire, bayonets, anything to basically eliminate the objective. Throughout World War II, the MG34 and the MG42 were mainly used as offensive machine guns and usually employed in those circumstances. There were occasions like, of course, the Pacific Wall, Omaha Beach, we're all familiar with, where they were employed in defensive positions, and of course they were able to do that very well. In order to keep sustained fire, they did use a quick barrel changing system, which I will show you now. About every 250 rounds, the barrel would have to be changed. Of course, the bolt would be locked to the rear. It is an open bolt machine gun, as is the Type 96. We would then push a button on the left-hand side of the barrel shroud extension, allowing the receiver to rotate out to the right freely of the barrel shroud. You could then reach in and extract your barrel out the rear. You could then have your assistant gunner replace a new barrel in through the way the first barrel was removed, pushing it into the barrel shroud, and then locking your receiver back to your barrel extension. You could then open up the top cover, put in a new belt of ammunition, close the top cover. Since your bolt is already to the rear and ready to go, you just resume firing. It was that quick. Because of this quick barrel change system and the fact that it was belt loaded, it made it a very, very viable option as a defensive heavy machine gun. The Type 96 also had a quick barrel change system. What you would essentially do is make sure your bolt is to the rear, and this is also an open bolt machine gun. You will then find a lever here which you will pull and then switch over to the other side. You just pull and rotate it over. This one is in there very, very tight. It is not welded or pinned in place. Essentially, and I'll go off on a little bit of a segue here, these are issued with two barrels. Both barrels would have to be hand fitted. This was another problem with the manufacturing process, is that a lot of these parts were hand fitted. But both the main and the spare barrel were hand fitted. You couldn't just take barrels off of other machine guns and expect that they would fit properly or headspace correctly. This is a barrel that is headspace correctly, but it is not matching to the machine gun. I do have one of the original matching barrels. However, this one, for whatever reason, by its former owner, was pressed into place and is very, very, very tight to get out. I would need some sort of tools to do that. I haven't tried to do that yet, but I have had this pin out and it is not welded or pinned at all. It's just tightly fit within the barrel trunnion. Anyway, getting back into this would be pulled out and then turned, and then once that's off, you just pull the pin out and then the barrel freely comes off the end. You put in your new barrel, stick the pin back in, rotate it to lock, and then your barrel's changed. Just as quickly probably as the MG34. In fact, if you've ever seen a Bren barrel change, it's actually very similar, very, very similar process. Because these were not typically used in heavy amounts of sustained fire and they were used mainly in small skirmishes, the spare barrels are very common to not be found. They were usually ditched by the machine gunner as they were found to be not necessary and added weight. The sighting system on the Type 96 did use this drum, which by turning the drum, it would elevate the rear sight base. And there are numbers indicated through a window here on the drum base, which would measure the range in hundreds of meters. Also, you will find a dovetailed base here, and that was to allow a periscopic type optic to be fitted to it. Just like this. We'll slide this on here. And then locked. With that in place, it did allow for longer range, more precision shooting. There also was a line of horizontal stadia within the reticle to allow for tracking of aircraft. It was common that you would see these mounted onto the sides of ships on anti-aircraft mounts, and again, they were used as anti-aircraft machine guns. The MG34 rear sight base was foldable for storage. It could then be folded up to be employed for use. It did have a V-notch here, which should be aligned with the front sight post, which also would fold down for storage. There is an adjustable ladder here, which could be elevated and marked in hundreds of meters for its total range, which is measured in 2,000 meters. On the rear sight base as well, there is a little arm that could be raised, and that was your anti-aircraft sight, your rear sight. Your anti-aircraft front sight or spider sight was mounted onto a bracket midway down the length of the barrel jacket, typically here. Now, focus on our other video on the MG34. This is a tanker gun, so it does not have that. It would have a removable bracket, which I don't have. The standard ground configuration gun, which has the barrel jacket that looks more like Swiss cheese that everybody's probably more familiar with, would actually have that bracket pinned on here. This doesn't have that. But that's how it would be adapted for anti-aircraft use. Because this did fire at about 800 rounds a minute, the rate of fire was optimal for anti-aircraft shooting, and it would be mounted on an anti-aircraft tripod, again, which is the tripod I use when I film the other video. Disassembly of the MG34 was a pretty simple process. We will, of course, open up the top cover, make sure that our bolt is closed, so I will go ahead and drop that. We can then rotate and remove the buffer and stock extension, and the mainspring will then come out the rear. I can then lift my feet tray off, push this button here to remove my top cover, and then I can pull and extract my bolt out the rear. If I wanted to, I could go further by removing the barrel and then removing the receiver from the barrel jacket. In any type of field repair where bolt replacements were required, going that far was not necessary. This is quick enough to clear out any jams or problems in the field during firing. Disassembly of the Type 96 is just as easy. We will go ahead and remove our magazine and make sure we're clear and the bolt is dropped forward. We can then rotate a pin, which is right here, and we can do that by pulling and then rotating up and then pulling that pin outward here. With that pin to the rear, I can now pull on the back plate here and remove it. That'll remove my very long mainspring and then the mainspring guide rod here and then the receiver back plate. I can then grab my charging handle and go ahead and pull my bolt out the rear. And then that'll bring out my bolt and my piston, which are housed on two separate pieces, here and here, which are both machined. To reassemble, I can go ahead and just push my bolt and piston back through the rear. Make sure the locking wings are inside. I'll go ahead and push that past the sear. Stick my mainspring onto its guide rod. Go ahead and insert that through the rear. Push it into place, push my retaining pin in down to lock, reinsert my magazine, and then I'm back in action. Well, that's basically all we have for you today on these. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, please consider hitting that like button or subscribing if you want to see more videos like this. Like I said, there is another video that we have that goes way more in depth into the MG34, and of course there's footage of it firing. I will leave a link to that somewhere here now. Also, the Type 96, I don't have such a video up yet, but I will, so be patient for that. If you're interested in seeing that, stick around and wait for that to show up. Again, this is Chris with Marksman Shooting Sports in Westfield, Indiana, and you are watching Marksman TV. We will see you next time.